Nobody that day expected to see a member of America's most talked-about family in such a simple, everyday place, a local KFC. Yet fate had a surprise in store. That's exactly where Barron Trump, the youngest son of President Donald Trump and Melania Trump, walked in. No grand entrance, no flashing lights, just a tall, quiet teenager stepping through the door, looking like any other kid craving some crispy fried chicken. He was dressed simply, blue jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. There was no entourage crowding around him, no fancy cars parked outside. Just Barron, blending into the weekend crowd like a regular customer. The few people inside the restaurant exchanged curious glances. "Is that really Barron Trump?" someone whispered, trying not to stare. Others shrugged, unsure. After all, it's not every day you see the son of a sitting president standing in line for a bucket of chicken. Barron didn't seem to notice the attention. He smiled politely at the cashier, placed his order and waited patiently. No demands, no special treatment, just quiet respect. As the line moved slowly, he looked around, taking in the atmosphere. Families sharing meals, kids dipping fries into ketchup. The sound of laughter mixed with the smell of warm biscuits and fried chicken. It was all so normal, so human. And yet, destiny was quietly setting the stage for something extraordinary. No Secret Service cars blocked the street. No reporters stood outside. It was just an ordinary lunch on an ordinary day. Or so it seemed. What happened next would soon capture the hearts of millions online. A simple act inside that KFC would remind the world that true kindness doesn't need fame, money, or power. It only needs one thing, a good heart. Barron quietly stepped through the glass doors of the KFC, the familiar smell of fried chicken instantly filling the air. The sound of sizzling oil, faint music from the overhead speakers, and soft chatter from families gave the place a cozy, everyday feeling. He walked up to the counter with an easy smile, politely nodding to the staff behind the register. His voice was calm and respectful as he placed his order. A classic meal, a bucket of crispy chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, and a soda. Nothing fancy, nothing special, just the comfort food every teenager loves. The cashier smiled back, perhaps recognizing him but saying nothing. Barron handed over his card, thanked her, and stepped aside to wait. There was no impatience in his body language, no sense of entitlement, just quiet politeness, the kind that instantly earns silent respect. But as he stood there, a gentle ripple of whispers began to spread through the small restaurant. A young couple near the door leaned toward each other. "Is that Barron Trump?" one murmured. A mother at the next table lifted her phone slightly, pretending to check her messages while sneaking a look. Some customers weren't sure. Others simply nodded, too polite to make a scene. Barron noticed, of course, but he didn't react. He just offered a polite nod and a small friendly smile. To anyone watching closely, it was clear he wasn't there for attention. He was simply there to enjoy a meal like everyone else. Then, as he turned toward the seating area, something caught his eye. Near the window, an elderly man sat alone. His clothes were worn and faded, a loose flannel shirt, old jeans, and shoes that had seen far too many miles. In his weathered hands, he held a few crumpled dollar bills, slowly counting them before glancing up at the menu board. There was a quiet struggle in his eyes, the kind that only someone who's lived through hard times carries. Barron's gaze softened. He watched for a moment as the man sighed, folded the bills back into his pocket, and stared out the window. Barron's expression changed. Concern flickered across his face. He hesitated for just a second, and then something simple yet powerful happened, something that would soon make the entire restaurant go completely silent. Before collecting his food, Barron paused for a moment. Something in his heart just wouldn't let him ignore the old man sitting by the window. With quiet determination, he walked back to the counter. Leaning slightly toward the cashier, Barron spoke in a low voice. The cashier's eyebrows lifted in surprise, then softened into a warm smile as she nodded. Whatever he had whispered clearly wasn't an ordinary request. Barron pulled out his wallet and paid again, this time for more than his own meal. A few minutes later, when the trays were ready, Barron picked them up carefully. One tray held his own order, the golden crispy chicken, mashed potatoes, and a drink. The second tray, however, was full. Extra chicken pieces, hot fries, a large drink, and a biscuit. more than enough for someone who might have been going hungry that day. The entire restaurant seemed to slow down as he walked toward the old man's table. Conversation softened. Forks stopped clinking against plates. Everyone's eyes followed the tall young man crossing the room with kindness in his hands. The old man, still staring out the window, didn't notice Barron until the tray was gently placed in front of him. He blinked, confused, looking from the steaming food up to the polite young face smiling back at him. "Sir," Barron said softly, his voice filled with warmth, "I noticed you might not have ordered yet. I thought you might like to have lunch with me." For a second, the old man couldn't speak. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Emotion flickered across his face, surprise, gratitude, disbelief, all at once. You're Barron Trump," he finally whispered, his voice trembling just a little. Barron smiled kindly and shook his head. "I'm just Barron today," he said, "and I'd be honored to share a meal with you." A hush fell over the restaurant. No one moved. Even the soft hum of the fryer in the back seemed quieter. A few people lifted their phones not to gossip or mock, but to capture something rare. A billionaire's son choosing compassion over comfort. At that moment, it wasn't about politics, fame, or wealth. It was just two people, one young, one old, sharing fried chicken, conversation, and a moment of pure human kindness. As the two sat together at that small KFC table by the window, the world around them seemed to slow down. The soft chatter of other customers faded into the background, replaced by the gentle rhythm of genuine conversation. Barron didn't rush the moment. He wasn't just being polite, he was fully present. He listened intently as the old man, who introduced himself as Henry, began to talk. Henry's voice was deep but weary, like someone who had carried many years of both hard work and quiet loneliness. He told Barron about his life, how he had worked for decades as a construction worker, building homes, schools, and bridges. His hands, rough and calloused, bore the marks of a man who had earned every meal he ever ate. But when he spoke about his wife, his eyes softened. She had passed away a few years earlier, and since then things hadn't been easy. "I still come here every weekend," Henry said with a nostalgic smile. "My wife used to love the biscuits here. We'd sit by this same window watching people pass by. Coming here now, it makes me feel like she's still close." Barron's expression warmed. He didn't interrupt or look away. He just listened. Every now and then he'd nod or smile, showing genuine compassion. When Henry cracked a small joke about how he used to burn toast every morning, Barron laughed, not out of politeness but real amusement. In return, Barron shared a few light-hearted stories about his school days, his passion for soccer, and how his mother's home cooking always tasted better than anything else. The two couldn't have come from more different worlds, yet in that moment they connected like old friends. Around them, people began to notice. Some smiled quietly, others wiped away tears. A few even approached to thank Barron for his kindness, but he gently waved them off. "It's not about me," he said softly. "It's about remembering that everyone deserves kindness, no matter who they are." When the meal finally ended, Barron walked back to the counter, slipped the cashier a folded note, and quietly paid for Henry's meals for the next week. The note read, "For Mr. Henry at Keep Smiling, Keep Shining. From your friend, Barron." Henry didn't find the note until after Barron had left. When he opened it and read the words, his hands trembled and tears filled his eyes. Within just a few hours, the quiet afternoon moment inside that small KFC had spread across the internet like wildfire. Someone who had been sitting nearby had recorded a short, heartwarming clip. Barron Trump laughing and chatting with Henry, sharing stories and smiles over fried chicken. The video was simple, only about 30 seconds long, but it carried a powerful message. The caption read, "Barron Trump buys lunch for a stranger, and it's the sweetest thing you'll see today." And that caption turned out to be right. By evening, the clip had been viewed millions of times. It was shared on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. People all over the world were commenting, liking, and tagging friends. For once, the internet wasn't filled with arguments or negativity. It was filled with warmth. News outlets soon picked up the story. Headlines began popping up everywhere. "A simple act, a big heart. Barron Trump's KFC moment wins the internet." Even late-night talk shows mentioned it, not to joke or criticize, but to celebrate a rare act of genuine kindness in a world that often feels divided. People who had never followed the Trump family before found themselves admiring Barron's gesture. Comment sections overflowed with positivity. Money can't buy kindness. This young man has it naturally. This is the kind of story the world needs more of. No cameras, no agenda, just humanity. One family friend later explained that Barron never meant for the story to go public. He hadn't told anyone about it. He just saw someone who needed a little kindness, the friend said. That's the kind of young man he is, quiet, respectful, and with a heart that truly cares. In a time when headlines often highlight conflict and negativity, this small moment reminded millions that goodness still exists, and sometimes it appears in the most unexpected places, like a KFC on a sunny afternoon in Florida. As for Henry, he later told reporters that the experience changed something inside him. It wasn't about the food, he said softly. It was about feeling seen, about knowing that someone, even someone from a famous family, cared enough to sit and share a meal. That's something I'll never forget, and maybe that's the real message. Kindness doesn't need cameras. It doesn't need headlines. It just needs heart. Because in the end, it wasn't about Barron Trump being the son of a president. It was about a young man reminding the world what truly matters: compassion, humility, and humanity.